The blood-soaked letter trembled in Hannah Lawson's hands as she read the final threat from their stepfather, her heart pounding with the knowledge that they had until dawn to flee before he returned to claim what he believed was rightfully his. The year was 1887, and the harsh New Mexico territory offered little mercy to three young women without protection or prospects. "Heather Hazel, we have to leave now," Hannah whispered urgently to her younger sisters, who were huddled together on the worn sofa of their small ranch house outside Lordsburg. At 22, Hannah had become the de facto guardian of her sisters after their mother's death 6 months ago. 18-year-old Heather looked up with swollen eyes, while 20-year-old Hazel stood with clenched fists. "He killed Mother, didn't he?" Hazel's voice was steady despite the accusation. "That's why she fell ill so suddenly after the wedding." Hannah couldn't bring herself to confirm what they all suspected, that Jeremiah Blackwell had systematically poisoned their mother after discovering the modest inheritance left by their biological father wasn't nearly what he had anticipated. Now, with their mother gone and nothing standing between him and the deed to their small ranch, his true nature had emerged. "We cannot prove it," Hannah said, tucking the letter into her pocket. "But I will not wait for him to return from Santa Fe to carry out these threats. We're leaving tonight, taking only what we need." Their preparations were swift and desperate. Hannah had been planning this moment since finding the small vial of arsenic hidden among Jeremiah's belongings. Each sister filled a single bag with necessities clothing, a few precious mementos, and the small amount of money Hannah had managed to hide away from their stepfather's greedy hands. As dawn approached, the three Lawson sisters slipped away from the only home they had ever known, heading toward Lordsburg on foot with nothing but determination and sisterly devotion to sustain them. The desert stretched before them, magnificent and merciless in the early morning light, as unforgiving as the man they fled. "You think anyone will help us?" Heather asked, her voice small against the vastness of the landscape. "We have to believe someone will," Hannah replied, though her heart doubted her own words. They had kept to themselves since their mother's marriage to Jeremiah, isolated by his controlling nature and their own growing suspicions. The sun had barely cleared the horizon when they heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching from behind. Hannah's heart seized with fear. Had Jeremiah returned early? Had someone already alerted him to their escape? "Quick, off the road," she hissed, pulling her sisters behind a large boulder. The rider appeared not Jeremiah, but a stranger on a magnificent chestnut horse. He slowed as he approached the spot where they hid, his keen eyes scanning the landscape. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and watchful blue eyes beneath a worn Stetson. His clothing was dusty from the trail, but the revolver at his hip gleamed with care. "I can see you behind that rock," he called out, his voice deep but not threatening. "No need to hide. I mean no harm." Hannah stepped cautiously from their hiding place, positioning herself protectively in front of her sisters. "We're just traveling to town," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. The man's expression remained neutral, but his eyes took in their hastily packed bags and fearful expressions with a perceptiveness that made Hannah uneasy. "3 young ladies walking alone at dawn is unusual," he observed. "Name's Caleb Hunter. I've got a ranch about 10 miles north of here." He tipped his hat slightly. "Would be safer if you'd allow me to escort you to town." Hannah hesitated, weighing their options. They needed to reach Lordsburg quickly before Jeremiah discovered their absence and came looking for them, yet trusting a stranger carried its own risks. Hazel stepped forward. "We'd be grateful for your escort, Mr. Hunter, provided you understand we're in a hurry." Caleb Hunter nodded, dismounting with fluid grace. I can lead my horse and walk with you, or we can take turns riding. Either way, we'll make better time than on foot." As they continued toward Lordsburg, Hannah maintained a wary distance from their self-appointed guardian. Heather, always the most trusting of the sisters, chatted nervously about inconsequential matters, while Hazel walked in silence, her eyes constantly scanning the horizon. "You're running from something," Caleb observed quietly to Hannah when they fell slightly behind the others. It wasn't a question. Hannah stiffened. "Our business is our own, Mr. Hunter." "Indeed it is," he agreed easily. "But should you need assistance beyond a simple escort to town, I have friends there. Good people." The sincerity in his voice made Hannah glance up at him. In the morning light, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, not from age, as he couldn't be more than 30, but from squinting into the sun and distance. The kind of vigilance necessary for survival in this unforgiving territory. "Why would you help 3 strangers?" she asked. A shadow crossed his face. "Let's just say I recognize the look of people fleeing something dangerous. I've worn it myself." They reached the outskirts of Lordsburg by mid-morning. The town had grown considerably since the railroad's arrival, with its wooden buildings extending several blocks in each direction from the main street. People bustled about their business, miners, cowboys, shopkeepers, and the occasional well-dressed woman hurrying from one establishment to another. "Where will you go now?" Caleb asked as they paused at the edge of town. Hannah realized she hadn't thought beyond reaching Lordsburg. They needed work and a place to stay, both difficult to secure without references or connections. "We'll find something," she said with more confidence than she felt. Caleb studied her for a moment. "The Windsor Hotel has a respectable widow who runs it. Mrs. Calloway might have work for you, at least temporarily. You can mention my name. I bring cattle through here regularly." Hannah nodded her thanks, reluctant but practical enough to accept the suggestion. As Caleb turned to leave, Heather impulsively reached out to touch his arm. "Thank you for walking with us," she said with genuine warmth. "It was kind of you." Something in Caleb's expression softened. "Take care of each other," he said, then mounted his horse and rode away, leaving the sisters to face the town alone. The Windsor Hotel stood 2 stories tall near the center of Lordsburg, its whitewashed exterior relatively clean compared to the dusty buildings surrounding it. A small sign advertised clean rooms at fair prices, and through the windows, Hannah could see a well-maintained lobby. Mrs. Calloway proved to be a stern-faced woman in her 50s with shrewd eyes that missed nothing. She listened to Hannah's carefully edited explanation of their situation, 3 sisters seeking work after family troubles, with skepticism. "And Mr. Hunter suggested you come here?" she asked, studying each sister in turn. "Yes, madam," Hannah confirmed. "We're hard workers and learn quickly." Mrs. Calloway's expression remained impassive. "I don't need maids, but I do need help in the kitchen and dining room. My last girl left to get married last month." She named a modest wage that would barely cover a room and meals. "You can share one of the smaller rooms upstairs. If you work out, we can discuss better arrangements later." It wasn't ideal, but it was shelter and legitimate work. Hannah accepted immediately, and within hours, the sisters were established in a tiny room with a single bed they would have to share and a small washstand. Their duties were divided according to their abilities: Hannah in the kitchen, Hazel serving in the dining room, and Heather cleaning the guest rooms. For 3 days, they worked from dawn until well after dusk, learning the routines of the hotel and keeping watchful eyes for any sign of Jeremiah. Hannah began to hope they might have successfully disappeared, at least for now. On the 4th day, as Hannah was preparing breakfast in the kitchen, Mrs. Calloway appeared in the doorway, her expression grave. "There's a man asking after 3 sisters," she said without preamble. Says he's their stepfather, concerned about their welfare after they ran away. Her eyes narrowed. Is that the family trouble you mentioned? Hannah's hands trembled as she set down the bowl she was holding. Please, Mrs. Calloway, he's not a good man. My sisters and I had reason to leave. The older woman studied her for a long moment. I told him I hadn't seen any new young women in town. He's checking the other establishments. She paused. I don't tolerate liars, girl, but I trust my instincts. That man's eyes aren't right. Relief washed through Hannah. Thank you. We won't bring trouble to your door, I promise. See that you don't, Mrs. Calloway replied, but her tone had softened slightly. Stay inside today, all three of you. Work in the kitchen and laundry. I'll have my son watch the street. Throughout the day, Hannah kept her sisters close, jumping at every sound from the lobby. By evening, Mrs. Calloway reported that Jeremiah had apparently left town, but Hannah knew better than to believe he had given up. He'll be back, she told her sisters that night as they huddled on their shared bed. And he'll bring the sheriff next time, claiming we stole from him or some other lie. We need to leave Lordsburg, Hazel said pragmatically, but we need more money first and somewhere to go. A soft knock at their door made them fall silent. Hannah approached cautiously, opening it just a crack to find Mrs. Calloway standing there. You have a visitor, she said quietly. Mr. Hunter is downstairs. Says he has information you need to hear. Caleb Hunter sat at a corner table in the empty dining room, his hat on the table before him. He stood as Hannah entered, his expression serious. Your stepfather is staying at the saloon down the street, he said without preamble. He's offering a reward for information about you and your sisters. Claims you stole family heirlooms. Hannah's stomach twisted with fear and anger. We took nothing that wasn't rightfully ours. Caleb nodded as if he'd expected that answer. Do you have somewhere else to go? Family, friends? No one, Hannah admitted. Our mother was estranged from her family, and our father's people are back east somewhere. We never knew them. I see. Caleb was silent for a moment, seemingly weighing something in his mind. I have a proposition for you, Miss Lawson. I need a housekeeper at my ranch. The place has been without a woman's touch since my sister married and moved to California 2 years ago. It's honest work, and you'd be well away from town. Hope and suspicion warred in Hannah's mind. And my sisters. There's plenty of work for all of you. My ranch isn't large, but it's growing. I have 3 hands working for me, all good men. He met her eyes directly. You'd have your own cabin on the property, privacy and safety. Why would you help us? Hannah couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. Something flickered in Caleb's eyes, a memory or emotion she couldn't identify. Let's just say I believe a man who hunts 3 young women with lies doesn't deserve to find them. Hannah hesitated, weighing their limited options. I need to discuss this with my sisters. Caleb nodded, standing to leave. I'll be in town until noon tomorrow. After that, I need to return to my ranch with or without you. He settled his hat on his head. For what it's worth, Miss Lawson, I give you my word that you and your sisters will be treated with respect under my roof. After he left, Hannah found her sisters waiting anxiously in their room. She explained Caleb's offer, watching their reactions carefully. I say we accept, Hazel said immediately. We can't stay here, and at least at his ranch we'd be away from town and the main roads. Heather looked more uncertain. Do you think we can trust him? Hannah sighed, sitting on the edge of the bed. I don't know, but Mrs. Calloway seems to respect him, and we need to leave Lordsburg before Jeremiah convinces the sheriff to help him search for us. By morning, their decision was made. They gathered their few belongings and bid farewell to Mrs. Calloway, who pressed a small package of food into Hannah's hands with unexpected kindness. Be careful, girls, she said. Mr. Hunter seems honorable, but you're still 3 young women alone in the territory. Caleb met them at the livery stable, where he had arranged for a wagon to transport them and their meager possessions. As they prepared to leave town, Hannah noticed a disturbance down the street, a man gesticulating wildly to the sheriff outside the town's small jailhouse. "Jeremiah," she whispered, recognizing her stepfather's tall figure and distinctive black coat. Caleb followed her gaze, his expression hardening. "Get in the wagon," he said quietly. "Keep your heads down." They complied immediately, huddling in the back of the wagon beneath a tarp while Caleb sat in the driver's seat, his posture casual but alert. Through a small gap in the covering, Hannah watched as Jeremiah and the sheriff began walking in their direction. Her heart pounded painfully as the 2 men approached the wagon. She heard Jeremiah's voice, demanding and familiar, asking Caleb if he'd seen 3 young women traveling together. "Can't say that I have," Caleb replied easily. "Just loading supplies to head back to my ranch." The sheriff's voice came next, more measured. "Mind if we take a look in your wagon, Hunter?" Hannah held her breath, clutching her sister's hands tightly. "Something wrong, Sheriff?" Caleb asked, his tone remaining conversational. "These supplies cost me good money. Don't appreciate the suggestion I might be smuggling something." "No suggestion," the sheriff replied quickly. "Just being thorough for this gentleman. He's concerned about his stepdaughters." "So concerned he's offering money for their return." Caleb's voice hardened slightly. "Seems strange to me." There was a moment of tense silence before Jeremiah spoke again, his voice carrying the false charm Hannah knew so well. "My daughters are confused and frightened. Their mother's death affected them deeply. I only want to bring them home where they belong." "Well, I hope you find them," Caleb said, and Hannah could hear the finality in his tone. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got a long ride ahead." For a terrible moment, Hannah thought Jeremiah would insist on searching the wagon. But after what seemed an eternity, she heard footsteps retreating, and the wagon shifted as Caleb climbed back into the driver's seat. "Stay covered until we're well out of town," he said quietly as the wagon began to move. It was nearly an hour before Caleb deemed it safe for the sisters to emerge from hiding. By then, Lordsburg had disappeared behind them, and the open country stretched ahead, beautiful and daunting in its vastness. "Thank you," Hannah said simply, as she moved to sit beside Caleb on the wagon seat, leaving her sisters to arrange their few possessions in the back. Caleb nodded, his eyes on the trail ahead. "Your stepfather didn't strike me as a man concerned about his daughter's welfare." "He's not our father in any sense that matters," Hannah replied, the bitterness she usually concealed evident in her voice. "He married our mother for what he thought was money, and now he wants the ranch that should rightfully be ours." Caleb glanced at her. "And is there money?" Hannah gave a short, humorless laugh. "Barely enough to keep the ranch running. Our father wasn't wealthy, just careful. The land is good, though, and the water rights are valuable." She hesitated. "We believe Jeremiah killed our mother when he realized the truth about our finances." Caleb's hands tightened on the reins, but his voice remained calm. "Do you have proof of that?" "Nothing that would stand in court," Hannah admitted. "But she was healthy until the marriage, then began wasting away. We found a vial of arsenic among his things afterward." They fell silent for a time, each lost in their own thoughts as the wagon rumbled northward. The landscape changed gradually, the flat desert giving way to rolling hills dotted with scrub, and the occasional stand of piñon pine. By late afternoon, they crested a rise to see a valley spread below them, with a modest ranch house and several outbuildings nestled against the base of a rocky hill. A small creek glinted in the sunlight, bordered by cottonwoods and willows that provided a welcome splash of green in the arid landscape. "That's the Flying H," Caleb said, a note of pride in his voice. "Not the biggest spread in the territory, but it's mine, free and clear." Hannah couldn't help but be impressed. The ranch wasn't large, but everything about it spoke of care and hard work: fences in good repair, healthy cattle grazing in the distance, smoke rising steadily from the main house chimney. "It's lovely," she said honestly. As they approached, a man emerged from one of the outbuildings, waving in greeting. Two others appeared from the direction of the corral, and Hannah felt a moment of unease at the prospect of being so outnumbered. Caleb seemed to sense her tension. "That's Miguel Rodriguez, my foreman," he explained, indicating the man who had waved. "Been with me since I bought this place 5 years ago. The others are Jim Tucker and Sam Wilson. Good men, all of them." He pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the ranch house, a solidly built structure of adobe and timber that was larger than it had appeared from a distance. The men approached, curiosity evident in their expressions. "Ladies, welcome to the Flying H," Caleb said formally before turning to his men. "Miguel, Jim, Sam, these are the Lawson sisters. Miss Hannah, Miss Hazel, and Miss Heather. They'll be staying in the old cabin and helping around the ranch." Miguel, a weathered man in his 40s with kind eyes, removed his hat and nodded respectfully. "Señoritas, the cabin has been empty since my family moved to their own place last year. It's small but sound." The younger men, Jim and Sam, both in their 20s, followed Miguel's lead in removing their hats, though they regarded the sisters with undisguised interest. "The cabin will need a good cleaning," Caleb continued. "Miguel, can you show the ladies where it is while I unload their things?" The cabin stood about 100 yards from the main house, partially sheltered by a cluster of cottonwoods. As Miguel had said, it was small, just 2 rooms with a stone fireplace in the main living area, and a tiny bedroom but solidly built and weathertight. "It's not much," Miguel apologized as he pushed open the door, "but with some work, it can be comfortable." Hannah stepped inside, taking in the dusty interior with its simple furnishings: a table with 2 chairs, a small cupboard, and in the bedroom, a bed frame without a mattress. It was humble but offered something they desperately needed: independence. "It's perfect," she assured Miguel. "We're grateful for the shelter." After Miguel left, Hannah turned to her sisters. "Well, what do you think?" Hazel was already examining the fireplace. "The chimney looks clear. With some cleaning and a few basic supplies, we can make this work." Heather moved to the single window, wiping dust from the glass to look out at the ranch beyond. "It feels safer here," she said softly, "away from everything." Caleb arrived with their bags, followed by Sam carrying a straw mattress. "It's not new," Caleb said apologetically, "but it's clean. We can arrange for proper bedding for all of you tomorrow when I send Jim to town for supplies." Hannah started to protest that they could manage, but Caleb held up a hand. "Consider it an advance on your wages. You can't work if you can't sleep." He left them to settle in, promising to return in an hour to escort them to the main house for supper. Once alone, the sisters began the task of making the cabin habitable, starting with sweeping out the dust and cobwebs that had accumulated during its vacancy. "What do you think of him?" Hazel asked as they worked, her voice low despite their solitude. Hannah considered the question carefully. "He seems honorable, but we should remain cautious until we know him better." "I trust him," Heather said simply, her inherent optimism showing through despite all they had endured. "He stood between us and Jeremiah without even knowing why we were running." Hannah couldn't deny the truth of that observation. Caleb Hunter had indeed placed himself between them and danger, asking for little explanation and offering help when they most needed it, True to his word, Caleb returned an hour later to escort them to the main house for the evening meal. The ranch house interior was surprisingly comfortable, with solid furniture, clean floors, and a few touches colorful woven rugs, framed photographs on the mantel that spoke of a home rather than merely a place to sleep. Miguel's wife, Elena, had prepared the meal before returning to their own home a mile away. The food was simple but plentiful: a hearty stew, freshly baked bread, and apple pie for dessert. The conversation around the table was initially awkward, but gradually eased as Jim and Sam shared amusing stories of ranch mishaps. "Tomorrow we can discuss your duties more specifically," Caleb said as the meal concluded. "For tonight, rest and settle in." In the days that followed, the sisters fell into a routine that suited their individual strengths. Hannah took charge of the main house, cooking and managing the household as she had done for her own family. Hazel, practical and efficient, divided her time between helping Hannah and working alongside Miguel with the ranch accounts. Heather, gentle and nurturing by nature, took particular interest in the kitchen garden and the few chickens and dairy cows that provided fresh food for the ranch. The men of the Flying H maintained a respectful distance, though Hannah occasionally caught Jim watching Hazel with particular interest, and Sam seemed to find reasons to be wherever Heather was working. Caleb himself was unfailingly polite but reserved, spending long days working with the cattle and returning exhausted in the evenings. 2 weeks after their arrival, as Hannah was preparing supper in the main house kitchen, Caleb entered unexpectedly. His expression was serious. "I need to speak with you," he said without preamble. "Your stepfather was asking questions in Whitesand, the next town over. He's getting closer." Hannah's hands stilled on the dough she was kneading. "How did you hear this?" Jim returned from delivering cattle. He overheard talk in the saloon. Caleb leaned against the doorframe, his posture casual but his eyes intent. "You and your sisters should stay close to the ranch house for a while. No trips to town." Hannah nodded, grateful for the warning but frustrated by the continued threat. "We can't hide forever," she said, more to herself than to Caleb. "No," he agreed quietly, "but we can make it difficult for him to find you while we figure out a more permanent solution." Hannah looked up sharply at his use of we. "This isn't your problem, Mr. Hunter." Caleb's expression hardened slightly. "The moment I helped you in Lordsburg, I made it my problem. And it's Caleb, not Mr. Hunter. We've shared a table for 2 weeks now." Hannah resumed kneading, focusing on the dough to avoid meeting his gaze. "Why are you really helping us? And don't say it's because you recognized our fear. There must be more to it." For a long moment she thought he wouldn't answer. When he did, his voice was low and controlled, but she could hear the underlying emotion. "My sister and I were orphaned young. A man took us and seemed kind at first, but he wasn't. He worked me like a slave and looked at my sister in ways no man should look at a child." His hands clenched at his sides. "We ran when I was 15 and she was 12. Not everyone who could have helped us did." Hannah's hands stilled again. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "What happened to you both? We got lucky. Found a rancher who needed help and didn't ask too many questions. He taught me everything I know about cattle and land." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "My sister lives in California now with a good husband and 3 children, but I never forgot what it was like to be hunted, to feel that fear." Hannah understood then. The depth of his commitment to protecting them went beyond mere kindness. It was a debt he felt he owed to his own past, to the frightened children he and his sister had been. "Thank you for telling me," she said simply. He nodded once, then straightened. "I should let you finish supper, just be careful, all of you." That night, Hannah shared Caleb's warning with her sisters in the privacy of their cabin. Hazel's response was predictably practical. "We need to be prepared to leave quickly if necessary," she said, already mentally cataloging their possessions. "And we should have a plan for where to go next." Heather looked distressed. "But I like it here. The ranch feels like it could be home." Hannah understood her sister's attachment. The Flying H had become a sanctuary for all of them, a place where they could work honestly, sleep without fear, and begin to heal from the trauma of their mother's death and their hasty flight. "Let's hope it doesn't come to leaving," she said, unwilling to extinguish Heather's hope entirely. "But Hazel is right. We should be prepared." Over the next few days, a tension settled over the ranch. Jim and Sam began taking turns keeping watch at night, and Caleb rode out more frequently to patrol the boundaries of his property. Hannah found herself jumping at unexpected sounds and watching the road anxiously whenever she worked outside. The inevitable confrontation came on a bright autumn morning nearly 3 weeks after their arrival at the Flying H. Hannah was hanging laundry while Hazel and Heather worked in the garden when the sound of approaching horses drew their attention to the road. Jeremiah Blackwell sat astride a black stallion, his tall figure unmistakable even at a distance. Beside him rode another man, not the sheriff from Lordsburg, but a hard-faced stranger whose hand rested casually near his holstered gun. "Get inside," Hannah ordered her sisters, her voice tight with fear. "Go to the main house. Find Caleb." For once, neither sister argued. They hurried toward the ranch house while Hannah stood her ground, heart pounding but determined not to show fear to the man who had destroyed their family. Jeremiah reined his horse to a stop a few yards away, his thin lips curving in a smile that never reached his cold eyes. "Hannah, my dear. What a chase you've led me on." His gaze swept over the ranch. "Playing at being servants, are you? How amusing." "We are not your dears, and we're not coming back with you," Hannah said, proud that her voice remained steady. "Our mother's ranch is lost to us. We've made a new start here." Jeremiah dismounted with deliberate slowness, handing his reins to his companion who remained on horseback. "You misunderstand the situation, as usual. You have something that belongs to me, the deed to the ranch. It was among the items you stole." "We stole nothing," Hannah retorted. "The deed was our mother's, and now it's ours." Jeremiah's false smile slipped, revealing the anger beneath. "Your mother was my wife. Her property is mine by law. Now, where are your sisters? It's time this childish game ended. They're not going anywhere with you." Caleb's voice came from behind Hannah, calm but carrying an unmistakable threat. He moved to stand beside her, his rifle held casually but ready. Miguel flanked him on the other side, similarly armed. Jeremiah's eyes narrowed as he assessed this new obstacle. "This doesn't concern you, Cowboy." "These are my stepdaughters, and they're coming home with me." "They're under my protection now," Caleb replied evenly, "and they've made it clear they don't wish to leave." "Protection?" Jeremiah laughed, an ugly sound. "Is that what they're paying you with, their protection?" 3 pretty girls living with a ranch full of men. I can imagine the arrangement. Hannah felt sick at the insinuation, but before she could respond, Caleb stepped forward, his expression dangerously calm. "You'll watch your tongue when speaking of these ladies," he said, his voice low. "They work honestly for their keep and have separate quarters. Now I suggest you leave my property before I forget my manners." Jeremiah's companion shifted in his saddle, his hand moving more obviously toward his gun. "You're outnumbered, mister." "Am I?" Caleb didn't take his eyes from Jeremiah. "Jim, Sam, our guests might need a clearer view of the situation." From the barn and the corral, Jim and Sam appeared, both armed and moving to positions that effectively surrounded Jeremiah and his companion. For a tense moment, no one spoke. Hannah could hear her own heartbeat in the silence, could feel the coiled tension radiating from Caleb beside her, Finally, Jeremiah gave a short laugh that contained no humor. "Very well. Play protector if you must." His cold gaze shifted to Hannah. "But understand this isn't over. Those girls belong with their family. I'll be back with the law on my side. If you want to take them," Caleb said quietly, "you'll have to go through me now, and I promise you won't find that easy." Jeremiah's jaw tightened, but he recognized the futility of pressing his advantage. With a curt nod to his companion, he remounted his horse. "This isn't the last you'll see of me," he warned, then wheeled his horse around and rode away, his companion following closely. No one moved until the riders had disappeared from sight. Then Hannah felt her knees weaken as the tension drained from her body. Caleb's hand on her elbow steadied her. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice gentle now that the threat had passed. "Yes," she managed. "Thank you, all of you." Caleb turned to his men. "Miguel, ride to Alina. Tell her what happened and ask her to stay with her sister for a few days, until we're sure they've left the area. Jim, Sam, double the watches tonight." As the men moved to follow his instructions, Caleb guided Hannah toward the main house where Hazel and Heather waited anxiously on the porch. "He'll be back," Hannah said quietly as they walked, "and next time he might bring a sheriff with him." "Then we'd better be ready," Caleb replied. "I meant what I said, Hannah. He'll have to go through me to get to you and your sisters. I won't let him take you." The determination in his voice should have reassured her, but Hannah felt a new fear growing, not for herself, but for this man who had placed himself between her family and danger. She couldn't bear the thought of Caleb being hurt because of them. "This isn't your fight," she protested weakly. Caleb stopped, turning to face her fully. For the first time, she saw something beyond protectiveness in his eyes, something deeper and more personal that made her breath catch. "It became my fight the moment I found 3 brave sisters hiding behind a boulder at dawn," he said softly. "And I don't abandon what's mine to protect." That night, despite Caleb's insistence that the ranch house was safer, the sisters returned to their cabin after dinner. Hannah couldn't sleep, replaying the confrontation with Jeremiah in her mind and worrying about what would come next. Near midnight, a soft knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. She approached cautiously, relieved to hear Caleb's voice identify himself before she opened it. He stood on the small porch, his expression troubled in the moonlight. "I couldn't sleep knowing you were out here," he admitted. "I've been thinking about what Jeremiah said." Hannah stepped outside, closing the door softly behind her to avoid waking her sisters. The night was cool but not cold, the sky ablaze with stars. "He'll try to use the law," she said, understanding Caleb's concern. "Legally, he may have a claim to our mother's property, and he might twist that into a right to guardianship over Heather at least." Caleb nodded. "I've been thinking about that. There might be a way to protect you all, but—" He hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. "It would require a significant change." Hannah's heart beat faster, though she wasn't sure why. "What kind of change?" Caleb took a deep breath. "Marriage would give you legal protection from his claims. As a married woman, you'd be beyond his reach, and as your sister's closest relative, you could claim guardianship over them." Hannah stared at him, momentarily speechless. "You're suggesting I marry someone to thwart Jeremiah, not someone," Caleb said quietly. "Me." The world seemed to still around them as Hannah processed his words. "You would do that? Enter a marriage of convenience with a woman you barely know?" Caleb's gaze held her steadily. "I would do that for you, yes. But Hannah—" He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the conflicting emotions in his eyes. "It wouldn't be merely convenient for me. I admire you, your courage, your devotion to your sisters, your strength. I believe we could build something real given time." Hannah's thoughts whirled. She had noticed her growing attraction to Caleb, of course his quiet strength, his kindness beneath the reserved exterior, the way his rare smiles transformed his face. But she had attributed it to gratitude and the natural response to finding safety after fear. "This is unexpected," she managed. "I know," he acknowledged. "And I'm not asking for an answer tonight. Think about it. Talk to your sisters. But know that my offer is sincere, and whatever you decide, I'll continue to protect all of you as best I can." He stepped back, giving her space. "Rest now. We can talk more tomorrow." After he left, Hannah remained on the porch for a long time, watching the stars and trying to untangle her thoughts. Marriage to Caleb would indeed provide legal protection for herself and her sisters. But could she enter such a union knowing it was born of necessity rather than love? And yet, wasn't there something more than necessity in the way Caleb had looked at her? In the way her own heart had leaped at his suggestion, before reason reasserted itself, morning came too quickly, bringing with it the need for decisions. Hannah shared Caleb's proposal with her sisters over breakfast in their cabin. Hazel, practical as always, saw the advantages immediately. "It makes legal sense," she admitted. "And Caleb is a good man. There are worse fates than being married to someone honorable who respects you." Heather, the romantic, was more enthusiastic. "He cares for you, Hannah. Anyone can see it in the way he watches you when you're not looking." Her eyes softened. "And I think you care for him too, even if you're afraid to admit it." Hannah couldn't deny the truth in her younger sister's observation. There was something between her and Caleb, something that might have grown naturally into love if given time and freedom from the pressing dangers they faced. "But what about you two?" she asked. "Would you be comfortable with this arrangement? Living here permanently with me as Caleb's wife? We could do worse than the flying H for a home," Hazel said with a small smile. "And you deserve happiness, Hannah. After everything you've sacrificed for us, you deserve a chance at love." Hannah found Caleb in the barn later that morning, mending tack with the focused attention he brought to all his tasks. He looked up as she approached, setting aside his work. "I've thought about your proposal," she said without preamble, finding courage in directness. "And discussed it with my sisters." Caleb stood, dusting off his hands. "And I have conditions," Hannah said, surprising herself with her boldness. "If we marry, it must be a true partnership. I won't be a dependent or an obligation. I want to help build this ranch to have a say in its future." A slow smile spread across Caleb's face, warming his blue eyes. "I would expect nothing less from you, Hannah Lawson. And my sisters remain with us for as long as they wish," she continued. "Their home is with me." "Of course," he agreed. "The Flying H has room for all of you, for a family." Hannah took a deep breath. "There's one more thing. I need to know that this isn't merely about protection. I couldn't bear a marriage without the possibility of affection." Caleb stepped closer, his expression softening. "Hannah, my offer of marriage began with wanting to protect you, yes, but my feelings run deeper than that." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, and took her hand in his. "I've come to care for you these past weeks. Your courage, your kindness, the way you never surrender to fear, how could I not admire such qualities? I believe we could build a good life together, a true marriage in all ways." The sincerity in his voice made Hannah's heart beat faster. "Then yes," she said softly, "I accept your proposal." The smile that illuminated his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "You won't regret this, Hannah. I promise you that." Events moved quickly after Hannah's acceptance. Caleb rode to Lordsburg the next day to speak with the town's minister and make arrangements for a simple ceremony. He returned with news that the wedding could take place in 3 days' time, and with a surprise, a delicate gold band that had belonged to his mother. "It's beautiful," Hannah said softly as he showed it to her, touched by the gesture. "Are you certain you want me to have it?" "I've carried it with me for years, waiting for the right woman," Caleb replied, his eyes holding hers. "I can think of no hands more worthy to wear it." The days before the wedding passed in a blur of preparation. Alina Rodriguez and her sister came to help clean the main house thoroughly, while Jim and Sam rode to neighboring ranches to invite the scattered community to witness the ceremony. Hazel and Heather transformed the cabin into a proper guest house where they would continue to live, giving Hannah and Caleb privacy in the main house. On the morning of the wedding, Hannah stood in what would soon be her bedroom in the ranch house, wearing the best dress she had brought from home, a simple blue cotton that Hazel had carefully pressed for the occasion. Alina had brought wildflowers from the creek bank, which Heather had woven into a crown for her hair. "You look beautiful," Heather said, adjusting the flowers one last time, "like a proper bride." Hannah smiled at her youngest sister, touched by her enthusiasm despite the unconventional circumstances of the wedding. "Thank you for supporting this, both of you," she said, including Hazel in her grateful glance. "I know it's happening quickly." "Sometimes the best decisions are made quickly," Hazel replied with uncharacteristic romanticism. "Besides, I've seen how you look at him when you think no one is watching." Hannah felt her cheeks warm. She couldn't deny that her feelings for Caleb had grown rapidly, blossoming from gratitude into something deeper and more complex. Whether it was love yet, she couldn't say with certainty, but she knew there was a foundation for it, strong and true. The ceremony itself was simple but meaningful. Caleb had arranged for the minister from Lordsburg to come to the ranch, and the small gathering of neighboring ranchers and their families stood witness in the ranch house parlor. Miguel and Alina served as formal witnesses, their warm approval evident in their smiles. Caleb waited for her by the fireplace, dressed in his best shirt and vest, his usually wind-blown hair neatly combed. The look in his eyes as she entered on Jim's arm, the older man having volunteered for the honor in the absence of her father, made Hannah's breath catch a mixture of admiration, tenderness, and something deeper that spoke of promises kept. The minister's words were traditional and brief, but Hannah felt their weight as she and Caleb exchanged vows. When he slipped his mother's ring onto her finger, his hands were steady, but his eyes revealed his emotion. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister concluded. "Mr. Hunter, you may kiss your bride." Caleb hesitated, his eyes seeking permission. Hannah smiled and lifted her face to his, her heart racing as he leaned down to press his lips gently against hers. The kiss was brief but tender, a promise rather than a passion, and Hannah found herself wishing for more even as he drew back. The small gathering applauded, and Alina wiped tears from her eyes as she came forward to embrace Hannah. "Welcome to the family, Senora Hunter," she said warmly. The celebration that followed was modest but joyful. Alina and her sister had prepared a feast, and the neighboring ranchers had brought additional food and drink. Music came from Miguel's guitar and Jim's surprisingly good fiddle playing, and for a few hours, the threats hanging over them seemed distant and manageable. As the sun began to set, the guests departed with good wishes and knowing smiles. Hazel and Heather retreated to their cabin after embracing Hannah, leaving her alone with her new husband in what was now their home. An awkward silence fell as the door closed behind the last guest. Hannah stood in the middle of the parlor, suddenly uncertain. This was her wedding night, but the circumstances of their marriage were unusual to say the least. Caleb seemed to sense her uncertainty. "Would you like some tea?" he offered, breaking the silence. "Or perhaps a walk? The sunset is beautiful from the hill behind the house." Hannah smiled gratefully at his consideration. A walk sounds lovely. They strolled in companionable silence up the gentle slope behind the ranch house, reaching the crest just as the sun touched the distant mountains. The valley below was bathed in golden light, the flying H spread out before them like a painting. "It's beautiful," Hannah said softly, genuinely moved by the vista. "You've built something wonderful here, Caleb." He stood beside her, his gaze following hers across his land. "It was lonely until now," he admitted. "A ranch needs more than cattle and good grass to be a home." Hannah turned to look at him, finding him already watching her with an intensity that made her heart quicken. "I want to make this a home with you," she said honestly. "Not just because of the protection you've offered, but because I care for you, Caleb, more than I expected to." Something softened in his expression. "Hannah," he said, her name almost a caress on his lips. "May I kiss you again, properly this time without an audience?" In answer, she stepped closer, lifting her face to his. This time, there was no hesitation in his kiss. It was deep and genuine, filled with a tenderness that made her knees weak. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her against him as she raised her hands to his shoulders. When they finally parted, Hannah was breathless, her cheeks flushed with color. Caleb's eyes had darkened, but he maintained a respectful distance despite the desire evident in his gaze. "I want this to be real," he said softly. "Us, our marriage. But I won't rush you, Hannah. We can take our time." Hannah found herself moved by his consideration. Many men would have claimed their marital rights without thought for her feelings, especially given the circumstances of their hasty wedding. Caleb's restraint spoke volumes about his character. "Thank you," she said, reaching up to touch his cheek gently. "But I don't want to begin our marriage with unnecessary distance between us. I'm your wife, Caleb, in all ways." He searched her eyes for a moment, then nodded, taking her hand in his. "Let's go home," he said simply. That night, in the privacy of what was now their bedroom, Hannah discovered that Caleb's gentleness extended to the most intimate aspects of their relationship. He was patient and considerate, guiding her through unfamiliar territory with tenderness that gradually gave way to passion as they learned each other's bodies and desires. Afterward, lying in his arms with her head on his chest, Hannah felt a contentment she had never experienced before. This marriage might have begun as a means of protection, but there was nothing false or convenient about the connection forming between them. "Are you all right?" Caleb asked softly, his fingers tracing gentle patterns on her bare shoulder. Hannah lifted her head to look at him, smiling at the concern in his eyes. "More than all right," she assured him. "I'm happy, Caleb, truly happy." His answering smile was like sunshine breaking through clouds. "So am I, Hannah Hunter," he said, testing her new name with evident satisfaction. "So am I." The days following their wedding settled into a new rhythm. Hannah took on the role of ranch mistress with natural grace, managing the household while continuing to spend time with her sisters. Hazel had begun working more closely with Miguel on the ranch accounts, showing a talent for numbers that impressed everyone. Heather blossomed in her care of the garden and smaller animals, her natural gentleness earning the respect of even the most hardened cowboys. For nearly 2 weeks, there was no sign of Jeremiah Blackwell. Hannah began to hope that perhaps he had given up, recognizing the futility of his claims now that she was legally married. But deep in her heart, she knew better. Jeremiah was not a man to surrender easily, especially when property was at stake. The confrontation came on a bright October morning. Hannah was in the kitchen preparing dinner while Caleb and the men were out checking the herd in the north pasture. Hazel and Heather were in their cabin, Hazel teaching her younger sister to mend clothing, a skill Heather had never mastered. The sound of approaching horses drew Hannah to the window. Her heart froze as she recognized Jeremiah's tall figure, accompanied by 3 men she didn't know. One wore a badge that gleamed in the sunlight. Hannah didn't hesitate. She ran to the rifle Caleb kept loaded by the door, then hurried outside to stand on the porch, the weapon held ready but not aimed. "That's far enough," she called as the riders approached the house. Jeremiah reined his horse to a stop, his thin lips curving in a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Is that any way to greet your stepfather, Hannah? And I see you're still playing with guns you don't know how to use." "I know how to use this just fine," Hannah replied steadily. Caleb made sure of that. The man with the badge urged his horse forward slightly. "Mrs. Hunter, I'm Sheriff Taylor from White Sand." His expression was neutral but not hostile. "I'm here on official business regarding a complaint filed by Mr. Blackwell." Hannah's grip on the rifle tightened at the use of her married name, so the sheriff knew she was married. That was something, at least. "My husband is checking the herd," she said. "He should return shortly. Perhaps you'd like to state your business then." Jeremiah's face darkened at her mention of Caleb. "Your hasty marriage doesn't change anything, Hannah. I've filed a legal challenge. The deed to your mother's ranch belongs to me, and I want it now." Hannah's heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. "If this is about the deed, then you should know it's no longer in my possession. It's been placed in the care of a lawyer in Santa Fe, along with documentation of our mother's suspicious death and the arsenic we found among your belongings." It was a bluff. The deed was actually hidden in the lining of her trunk, but the flash of alarm in Jeremiah's eyes told her the shot had hit home. "You're lying," he snarled. "You wouldn't know how to find a lawyer, let alone afford one." "My husband has connections," Hannah replied, emboldened by his reaction. "And unlike you, he doesn't underestimate women's intelligence." The sheriff looked between them, clearly sensing undercurrents he didn't fully understand. "Perhaps we should all calm down and wait for Mr. Hunter," he suggested. "Mr. Blackwell has made serious accusations, but they need to be addressed properly." At that moment, Hazel and Heather emerged from their cabin, alerted by the voices. Jeremiah's gaze shifted to them, his expression calculating. "All 3 of my wayward daughters together again," he said, his voice dripping with false sentiment. "Heather, dear, you're looking well. Surely you've missed your poor stepfather." Heather, normally the gentlest of the sisters, lifted her chin with uncharacteristic defiance. "I haven't missed being afraid in my own home," she said clearly, "or watching you hurt my sisters." Before Jeremiah could respond, the sound of galloping hooves drew everyone's attention. Caleb appeared on the ridge above the ranch house, followed closely by Miguel, Jim, and Sam. They rode hard down the slope, pulling their horses to a stop in a cloud of dust between the sisters and Jeremiah's party. Caleb dismounted in one fluid motion, his expression hard as granite as he moved to stand beside Hannah. His hand touched her elbow briefly, a silent question about her welfare that she answered with a slight nod. "Sheriff," he acknowledged calmly, "what brings you to my ranch?" Sheriff Taylor seemed relieved by Caleb's measured response. "Mr. Blackwell has filed a complaint regarding property he claims was stolen by his stepdaughters, specifically a deed to a ranch near Lordsburg. My wife and her sisters took nothing that wasn't rightfully theirs," Caleb replied, his voice steady. "The deed belonged to their mother, and upon her death, to her daughters." "The property of a wife becomes her husband's by law," Jeremiah interjected. "That deed is mine, and I want it returned immediately." "That would be a matter for the courts to decide," the sheriff said, clearly uncomfortable with the tension radiating between the 2 men. "I'm here to investigate the claim, not to make legal judgments." Caleb's expression didn't change, but Hannah felt him shift slightly, positioning himself more protectively beside her. "Then, investigate, Sheriff. but do so knowing that Hannah is now my wife, legally beyond Mr. Blackwell's authority. And her sisters are under our protection as their closest living relatives. One of Jeremiah's companions, a rough-looking man with a scar across his cheek, spat on the ground. "Mighty convenient marriage," he commented, right after they ran with the deed. "Watch your tongue," Miguel said quietly, his hand resting on his holstered gun. "You speak of the patron's wife." The tension ratcheted higher, with both groups of men measuring each other with growing hostility. Hannah feared violence was moments away when the sheriff raised his hands placatingly. "Let's all take a breath," he suggested. "Mr. Hunter, I'd like to speak with you and your wife privately, if I may. This situation seems more complicated than Mr. Blackwell initially presented." Caleb nodded curtly. "We can talk in the house. Mr. Blackwell and his friends can wait out here." Jeremiah began to protest, but the sheriff cut him off. "That seems reasonable. I'll hear both sides independently." He dismounted, handing his reins to one of his deputies. "Mr. Blackwell, please remain here with my men." Inside the house, Hannah quickly explained to the sheriff the circumstances of their mother's death, Jeremiah's threatening behavior, and their flight from the ranch. She spoke honestly about her marriage to Caleb, acknowledging its hasty nature but emphasizing that it was a true union. "The deed is rightfully ours," she concluded. "Our father left the ranch to our mother, and she intended it for us. Jeremiah married her under false pretenses, expecting wealth that didn't exist." The sheriff listened thoughtfully, asking occasional questions. When they finished, he sat back in his chair with a sigh. "This is indeed more complicated than Mr. Blackwell suggested," he admitted. "He claimed you were rebellious daughters who stole valuable property and ran away. He made no mention of your mother's death or his threats." "He's not an honest man," Caleb said quietly, "and he's dangerous. My wife and her sisters have good reason to fear him." Sheriff Taylor nodded slowly. "I can see that. However, the legal question of the deed's ownership isn't something I can resolve." He hesitated. "If you do have it, Mrs. Hunter, I would suggest consulting a proper lawyer. There may be documentation of your mother's intentions that could strengthen your claim." Hannah exchanged a glance with Caleb. "Thank you for your advice, Sheriff," she said carefully. "In the meantime," the sheriff continued, "I see no evidence of theft that would justify forcing you to return to Mr. Blackwell's custody. You're a married woman now, and your adult sisters have chosen to remain with you." He stood. "I'll explain to Mr. Blackwell that this is a civil matter requiring legal resolution, not a criminal case warranting my intervention." After the sheriff left to speak with Jeremiah, Caleb took Hannah's hands in his. "Are you all right?" She nodded, though she couldn't stop the slight trembling in her fingers. "I was afraid he might try to force Heather to go with him at least." "I wouldn't have allowed that," Caleb said, his voice low with intensity. "I meant what I said, Hannah. You and your sisters are under my protection now. No one will take you from this ranch against your will, not while I draw breath." The fierceness of his declaration made Hannah's heart swell with emotion. She leaned forward to press her forehead against his chest, drawing strength from his solid presence. "I'm beginning to think I might have married the most stubborn man in the territory," she murmured. Caleb's chuckle rumbled beneath her ear. "You might be right about that. Fortunately for me, you seem to like stubborn men." Outside, they could hear raised voices, Jeremiah clearly unhappy with the sheriff's decision. When they rejoined the others, the confrontation was reaching its climax. "This is absurd," Jeremiah was shouting. "You're taking the word of a girl and her convenient husband over a respectable businessman." The sheriff remained calm. "I'm taking no one's word as final, Mr. Blackwell. I'm simply stating that your accusations of theft are not supported by sufficient evidence to justify criminal charges. If you believe you have a legal right to the deed, you need to pursue that through the proper channels. Jeremiah's face contorted with rage as he saw Hannah and Caleb emerge from the house. "This isn't over," he spat. "Not by a long shot. That deed belongs to me, and I'll have it along with satisfaction for the lies you've spread about me." "The only lies here are yours," Hannah replied steadily, drawing strength from Caleb's presence beside her. "Go back to Lordsburg, Jeremiah. There's nothing for you here." For a moment she thought he might attack them despite the sheriff's presence. But after a tense silence, he wheeled his horse around. "You'll regret this," he warned, then spurred his mount and rode away, his companions following after exchanging dark looks with Caleb's men. The sheriff watched them go, then turned to Hannah and Caleb with a troubled expression. "Be careful," he advised. "Mr. Blackwell doesn't strike me as a man who accepts defeat gracefully, and while I found no cause for criminal action today, I can't guarantee another sheriff might not see things differently." "We understand," Caleb said, shaking the man's hand. "Thank you for your fairness, Sheriff Taylor." After the lawman departed, the ranch fell into an uneasy quiet. Caleb doubled the night watches, unwilling to risk Jeremiah returning under cover of darkness. Hannah retrieved the deed from its hiding place, and they discussed what to do with it. "We should do as the sheriff suggested and consult a lawyer," Caleb said that evening as they sat before the fire in their bedroom. "I know a good one in Santa Fe, honest and discreet." Hannah nodded, staring into the flames. "But will it ever truly be over? Jeremiah won't stop, Caleb. Not until he gets what he wants or—" She couldn't finish the thought. Caleb took her hand, his thumb stroking gently across her knuckles. "We'll protect what's yours, Hannah, together. That's what family does. Family." The word warmed Hannah's heart. In just a few short weeks, she had gone from fleeing in terror to finding a new home, a new husband, a new future. Despite the continued threat from Jeremiah, she felt something she hadn't experienced since before her mother's illness: hope. The next morning, Caleb prepared to ride to Whitesand to send a telegram to the lawyer in Santa Fe. As he saddled his horse, Hannah brought him a package of food for the journey. "Be careful," she said, unable to suppress a flicker of anxiety at his departure. "Jeremiah might still be in the area." Caleb smiled, touching her cheek gently. "I'll be back before sunset. Miguel and the boys will keep watch here. Try not to worry too much." After he rode away, Hannah tried to occupy herself with normal tasks: baking bread, mending clothes, checking the henhouse for eggs. But an uneasiness lingered, making her start at every unexpected sound. By mid-afternoon, dark clouds had gathered on the horizon, promising a rare autumn storm. Hannah stood on the porch watching the distant lightning with growing concern. Caleb should have been on his way back by now. When Miguel approached from the barn, his expression grave, Hannah knew something was wrong before he spoke. "Rider coming," he said quietly. "Not the patron, one of Sheriff Taylor's deputies." Hannah's heart sank. "Alone?" Miguel nodded, his hand resting reassuringly on her shoulder. "Do not fear, Senora. Whatever news he brings, we face it together." The deputy arrived looking rain-soaked and grim. "Mrs. Hunter," he greeted Hannah formally, "I'm afraid I have bad news. Your husband was ambushed on the road back from Whitesand." The world seemed to tilt beneath Hannah's feet. "Is he—" She couldn't form the words. "He's alive," the deputy assured her quickly. "But injured, shot in the shoulder. The doctor in Whitesand is tending to him now. He sent me to tell you and to warn you it was Blackwell's men who did it. They were looking for something specific." "The deed," Hannah whispered, cold fear washing through her. "They thought he carried it with him." The deputy nodded. "Mr. Hunter managed to fight them off and make it to town, but he's in no condition to travel yet. He asked me to tell you to be on guard. Blackwell might come here next, thinking the deed is at the ranch. Hannah straightened, her fear giving way to determination. This man, her stepfather, had already taken her mother and now had tried to take her husband. She would not allow him to destroy anything else she loved. "Thank you for bringing this message," she said to the deputy. "Will you return to White Sand now?" "Yes, madam. The sheriff sent me with instructions to escort you back if you wish to go to your husband." Hannah considered this briefly but shook her head. "My place is here, protecting our home. Please tell my husband that we are safe and that he should focus on healing." She hesitated. "And tell him I love him." The words came naturally, surprising her with their truth. Sometime during these weeks of danger and protection, of growing trust and tender nights, Hannah had fallen in love with Caleb Hunter. The realization strengthened her resolve. After the deputy departed, Hannah called a meeting with Miguel, Jim, Sam, and her sisters. "Jeremiah will come here," she said without preamble. "Tonight, most likely, during the storm when visibility is poor. He'll expect to find us unprepared without Caleb." "What do you want us to do, Senora?" Miguel asked, his expression reflecting absolute loyalty. "We prepare a welcome he won't expect," Hannah replied, a steely determination in her voice that even Hazel had never heard before. "I won't run anymore. This ends tonight." Throughout the afternoon, they prepared the ranch for defense. Weapons were cleaned and positioned strategically. The house and outbuildings were secured, with clear lines of sight established between defensive positions. Hannah sent Heather to stay with Alina at Miguel's house, despite her protests, unwilling to risk her youngest sister in the coming confrontation. "You can't send me away," Heather argued. "I want to help protect our home too." Hannah embraced her sister tightly. "You are helping. By staying safe, you're giving me one less thing to worry about." She pulled back, looking into Heather's eyes. "Please do this for me. I couldn't bear it if anything happened to you." Reluctantly, Heather agreed, leaving with Miguel's oldest son who had come to escort her. Hazel remained at Hannah's side, refusing all suggestions that she should seek safety as well. "We started this together," she said firmly. "We'll finish it together." As darkness fell, the storm arrived in full force. Rain lashed against the windows of the ranch house, while thunder shook the very foundations. Hannah and Hazel waited in the parlor, a shotgun across Hannah's lap and a revolver in Hazel's steady hands. Miguel was positioned in the barn with a clear view of the approach road, while Jim and Sam guarded the rear of the property. The attack, when it came, was swift and direct. 3 riders emerged from the storm-darkened night, approaching the house at a gallop. Hannah recognized Jeremiah's tall figure in the lead, his face briefly illuminated by a flash of lightning. "They're here," she said quietly to Hazel. "Remember the plan. No one shoots unless they force our hand." Hannah stepped onto the porch as the riders pulled up before the house, the shotgun held ready but not aimed. Rain plastered her hair to her head and soaked her dress, but she stood tall and unafraid. "That's far enough, Jeremiah," she called over the storm. "This is private property and you're not welcome here." Jeremiah dismounted, his movements betraying his rage. The 2 men with him remained on horseback, their hands hovering near their weapons. "Where's your protector now, Hannah?" Jeremiah taunted, advancing toward the porch. "Did he abandon you at the first sign of real trouble?" "My husband will recover from your cowardly ambush," Hannah replied evenly. "And I'm perfectly capable of protecting what's mine in his absence." Jeremiah laughed, a harsh sound against the storm. "A woman with a shotgun she's too gentle to use. How frightening." His expression hardened. "Give me the deed, Hannah. I know you have it. Give it to me now and perhaps I'll be merciful." "The deed isn't here," Hannah lied smoothly. It's on its way to Santa Fe with documentation of Mother's murder. Even if you kill us all tonight, you'll never get your hands on it." Jeremiah's face contorted with fury. "You stupid girl. Do you think anyone will believe your wild accusations? Your mother died of natural causes." "Everyone knows that." "Not everyone," came a new voice from the darkness. Sheriff Taylor emerged from the side of the house, his gun drawn and pointed at Jeremiah. "I've been having some interesting conversations in Lordsburg, Mr. Blackwell. People who noticed your wife's sudden decline after the marriage. The doctor who found your behavior suspicious but lacked evidence." Jeremiah took an involuntary step back, his hand moving toward his coat. "This is absurd. You have no proof of anything." "Don't do it, Blackwell," the sheriff warned as Jeremiah's hand continued its movement. "Don't make this worse than it already is." For a moment, time seemed suspended. Hannah could see the calculation in Jeremiah's eyes, the weighing of options, the desperate search for escape. Then his hand plunged into his coat, emerging with a revolver. The shot that rang out didn't come from Jeremiah's gun, nor from the sheriff's. It came from behind Hannah, where Hazel stood in the doorway, the smoking revolver steady in her hand. Jeremiah staggered, clutching his arm where the bullet had struck him, his own unfired weapon falling to the mud. "That's for our mother," Hazel said, her voice deadly calm. Jeremiah's companions, seeing their leader wounded and the sheriff's gun now trained on them, raised their hands in surrender. From the barn and the rear of the property, Miguel, Jim, and Sam emerged, their rifles adding to the overwhelming force now facing the intruders. "Jeremiah Blackwell, you're under arrest for attempted murder and conspiracy," Sheriff Taylor said, moving forward to secure the wounded man. "Your friends here will be joining you in custody." As the sheriff and his deputies, who had been positioned around the property on his orders, took charge of the prisoners, Hannah turned to Hazel, who stood still holding the revolver with a strange expression on her face. "You saved us," Hannah said softly, taking the weapon gently from her sister's hand. Hazel blinked as if waking from a trance. "I didn't plan to shoot, but when I saw him reaching for his gun, all I could think about was Mother and you and Heather. I couldn't let him take anyone else from us." Hannah embraced her sister tightly. "It's over now, truly over." Sheriff Taylor approached them after securing the prisoners. "Mrs. Hunter, I owe you an apology. When I left yesterday, I had suspicions about Mr. Blackwell that I didn't share fully. I went to Lordsburg to investigate further and found several witnesses willing to speak about your mother's suspicious illness. When I returned to question him, I discovered he had already left town with clear intent." "So you followed him here," Hannah said, understanding dawning. The sheriff nodded. "I arrived just before the storm and observed the ranch from a distance. When I saw your preparations, I realized you were expecting trouble and decided to wait and watch. I hope you'll forgive my caution." "There's nothing to forgive," Hannah assured him. "Without your intervention, this might have ended very differently." As the storm began to subside, Hannah felt an overwhelming weariness settle over her. The danger was past, but Caleb was still injured in White Sand, and the emotional toll of the confrontation was only now making itself felt. "I need to go to my husband," she said, looking toward the road that led to town. "My deputies and I will escort you at first light," Sheriff Taylor promised. "The roads are too treacherous tonight. Your husband is in good hands with Dr. Wells, I assure you." The journey to White Sand the next morning was slow but determined. Hannah left Hazel in charge of the ranch with Miguel and Jim, taking only Sam as additional protection. The town was small but well established, with a proper doctor's office on the main street where they found Caleb. He was pale but alert, his left shoulder heavily bandaged. His face lit up at the sight of Hannah, relief evident in every line of his features. "You're safe," he said as she rushed to his bedside. "When the sheriff left to follow Blackwell, I feared the worst." "We're all safe," she assured him, taking his hand carefully. "Jeremiah is in custody, charged with attempted murder and conspiracy. The sheriff believes there will also be an investigation into Mother's death now that witnesses have come forward." Caleb closed his eyes briefly, his relief palpable. "Thank God." He looked up at her again, his gaze intense. "When I was lying on that road, thinking I might not make it back to you, I realized something, Hannah." "What?" she asked, her heart quickening at his tone. "I realized that what began as protection had become the most important thing in my life. I love you, Hannah Hunter. Not because you needed me or because I wanted to help you, but because of who you are, your courage, your heart, your strength." Tears filled Hannah's eyes as she leaned forward to press her forehead against his. "I love you too," she whispered. "I told the deputy to tell you, but I don't know if he did. I love you, Caleb Hunter, and I can't imagine my life without you now." The doctor declared Caleb fit to travel after 2 more days of rest, though he would need weeks to fully recover from the bullet wound. The return to the Flying H was a joyful one, with Heather running to embrace Hannah and Caleb the moment they arrived, and Miguel's family preparing a celebration dinner despite Caleb's weakened state. That night, as Hannah helped Caleb prepare for bed, carefully mindful of his injured shoulder, she found herself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this point. "A few months ago, I thought our lives were over," she said quietly as she sat beside him on their bed. "When Mother died, when we discovered what Jeremiah had done, I couldn't see any future for us. And now—" "And now," Caleb prompted, taking her hand in his, "now I have hope again, not just for survival, but for happiness, for love." She smiled, blinking back tears. "It's strange how the worst moments of our lives can lead to the best, isn't it? Life has a way of surprising us," Caleb agreed, drawing her gently closer. "When I found 3 frightened sisters hiding behind a boulder at dawn, I never imagined I was meeting my future wife." Hannah laughed softly. "When you said he'll have to go through me now, I thought you were just being gallant. I had no idea how literally you meant it, or how grateful I would be that you did." In the months that followed, life at the Flying H settled into a peaceful rhythm. Jeremiah Blackwell was convicted of attempted murder and conspiracy, with additional charges pending as the investigation into his wife's death continued. The deed to the Lawson ranch was legally confirmed as belonging to the 3 sisters, who decided to sell it to a neighboring family they had known since childhood. Hazel discovered an unexpected talent for ranching, working alongside Miguel to expand the Flying H operations, and eventually catching the eye of a cattle buyer from Colorado, who began finding reasons to visit the ranch with increasing frequency. Heather blossomed in her new freedom, developing her natural healing abilities by studying with the local doctor, and eventually beginning training as a nurse, a path that would lead her to meet a young doctor who admired her gentle strength as much as her beauty. For Hannah and Caleb, the hasty marriage of convenience transformed completely into a deep and abiding love. Their first child, a son they named David, was born exactly 1 year after their wedding, with a daughter, Elizabeth, following 18 months later. On the 2nd anniversary of their wedding, as they stood together on the hill behind the ranch house watching the sunset, Caleb wrapped his arms around Hannah from behind, his chin resting on top of her head. "Are you happy, Hannah Hunter?" he asked softly. She leaned back against him, feeling the solid strength that had never wavered since that first morning when he found 3 sisters hiding behind a boulder. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied truthfully. "You gave us more than protection, Caleb. You gave us a home. You gave me a family, he countered, turning her in his arms to face him. Something I never thought I'd have again after my sister moved away. In the valley below, they could see the expanded ranch, new barns, additional grazing land, and the small schoolhouse they had built for their children and those of neighboring ranches. The Flying H had prospered under their joint care, becoming not just a successful business but a true community. We built this together, Hannah said, pride evident in her voice. From fear and necessity came something beautiful. As the last rays of sunlight painted the valley in gold, Caleb kissed his wife with all the tenderness and passion that had grown between them. What had begun with a desperate escape and a cowboy's promise of protection had become a love story neither could have imagined, one built on courage, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Three sisters had fled their stepfather in fear and found not just safety but a future filled with love and possibility. And the cowboy who had once said, "He'll have to go through me now," had indeed stood between them and danger, never wavering in his protection or his growing love. As darkness fell over the Flying H, the lights of the ranch house glowed warmly, a beacon of the home and family that had been forged in adversity and would endure for generations to come.